My fiancé told me, say sorry to my ex or the wedding is off. I answered, then the wedding is off, and the sentence hung between us like a blade. The florist was still arranging ivory roses behind her, their scent thick and sweet, as if nothing had just died. She laughed first, soft, disbelieving, like I'd delivered a clever joke instead of a verdict. Her phone screen glowed in her palm. His name was still there, bright and recent. I could hear the venue manager in the hallway discussing chair covers, oblivious to the quiet demolition happening 3 feet away. My chest felt strangely light, almost peaceful, the way the air changes before a storm breaks. She tilted her head, waiting for me to fold, to apologize to the man she once loved more than her pride. I didn't. I just watched her smile slowly crack, realizing the groom she thought she owned had already walked away inside. I've always been the quiet one people mistake for harmless, the man who listens longer than he speaks, who notices what others miss, who gets described as easygoing when they really mean easy to overlook. In our relationship, she was the spark and I was the steady flame. She dazzled rooms, I paid deposits. I remembered birthdays, fixed problems, absorbed moods. She remembered that I was reliable. That was my role, dependable background music. Her ex never really left the story. He lingered like a watermark on old paper, faded but impossible to erase. She called him history, yet she kept his number pinned, his opinions quoted, his preferences remembered with a sharpness she never used for mine. I told myself patience was love, that understanding proved strength, that loyalty would eventually be seen. Instead, it became expected. People assume silence means surrender. They don't realize silence is often observation sharpening into decision. I watched how easily she dismissed my boundaries, how confidently she spoke for me, how naturally she believed I would bend. The truth is, I had been underestimated my whole life, and I had learned something useful from it. When no one thinks you'll walk away, the door is always unlocked. The signs had never arrived loudly, they slipped in like drafts under a closed door. At dinners, she'd compare my opinions to his the way someone checks a receipt, casually as if accuracy mattered more than courtesy. He used to say that too, she'd murmur, tilting her glass, eyes drifting somewhere behind my shoulder. The first time I smiled. The 5th time I memorized the pattern. When we chose music for the reception, she rejected my suggestion without listening past the first 10 seconds. Minutes later, her phone chimed. She read a message, lips curving, then played a song. This one's perfect, she said. Same genre. Same tempo. His recommendation, though she didn't need to say it. Her voice softened in that particular way I'd begun to recognize. Even her pauses spoke. When I set a boundary, she'd go quiet. Not thoughtful quiet, but evaluative quiet, like a buyer deciding whether a flaw mattered. Then she'd pat my arm, light and dismissive, and change the subject as if my words had been background noise. I never argued. I watched. Because tension doesn't always sound like conflict. Sometimes it sounds like someone slowly testing how much of you they can erase before you notice you're disappearing. The moment didn't arrive like thunder, it arrived like clarity. We were seated across from the venue coordinator, reviewing final confirmations, when her phone buzzed again. She glanced down and I saw it. The name, the softening of her eyes, the unconscious straightening of her posture. She didn't excuse herself. She didn't hide it. She just read, smiled faintly, and said to me almost absently, "He thinks we should move the ceremony to sunset. Better lighting for photos." Not we. Not you. He. The coordinator looked at me, pen hovering, waiting for my approval as if I were still part of the decision. In that pause, everything aligned with quiet precision. Every comparison, every dismissal, every time I'd been treated like a placeholder in my own life. I realized she wasn't choosing between us. She had already chosen long ago. I had simply been convenient enough to keep. So when she later gave the ultimatum, apologize to him or lose her, it didn't feel like a demand. It felt like confirmation. Walking away wasn't dramatic. It was administrative. I called the venue, stated my name, and said calmly, "Please cancel the wedding. This is final." I didn't slam doors or block numbers. I made lists. Silence is most effective when it's organized. The contract sat in my email, 12 pages of polite legal language I'd actually read when we signed it, because I'm the kind of man who reads footnotes. The cancellation clause was precise: full refund if notice came before the final vendor confirmation window. We were still inside it by 18 hours. I noted timestamps, downloaded receipts, and saved every invoice bearing my name. Nearly all of them did. I'd handled the bookings because she said paperwork stressed her. I'd believed I was being supportive. It turned out I'd been positioning myself. I called each vendor myself. Same calm tone, same sentence. Plans have changed. Please process the cancellation under the original agreement. No accusations. No explanations. Professionals don't ask questions when instructions are clear and lawful. By sunset, confirmations filled my inbox like quiet witnesses. Deposits reversed. Orders voided. Reservations released. Then I transferred what remained of the wedding fund back into my personal account, the one I'd used all along. Not spitefully. Just accurately. She thought my silence meant hesitation. She didn't understand it was procedure. She found out the way truth usually arrives, through someone else's voice. Her phone rang while she was in the kitchen, sunlight cutting across the counter in pale gold strips. I heard her say hello, casual, distracted, then pause. The silence that followed was different from all her others. This one had weight. "The cancellation is confirmed, ma'am," the coordinator's voice carried faintly through the speaker. "Per the groom's authorization, the event has been released." Her back straightened. I watched the muscles in her shoulders tighten beneath the thin fabric of her blouse. "Released," she repeated, softer now. Not angry. Not yet. Just disoriented, like someone who's stepped onto a stair that isn't there. She turned toward me slowly, phone still at her ear, eyes searching my face for the hesitation she expected to find. I gave her none. I was sitting at the table, hands folded, the picture of patience. The realization spread across her expression in stages: confusion, calculation, then the smallest fracture of alarm. Not because I'd shouted or accused. Because I hadn't. Consequences rarely announce themselves. They unfold, precise and quiet, like a contract being honored line by line. News travels faster than explanations. By evening, her sister called first, voice sharp with disbelief. Then her mother, who spoke to me carefully, as if tone alone could reopen a closed decision. Friends sent cautious messages that all sounded the same. What happened? None of them accused me. That was the surprising part. Without raised voices or dramatic scenes, there was nothing obvious to condemn, only a fact quietly standing in the room. The wedding had been cancelled by the person who paid for it. She reacted differently. Not loudly. Not theatrically. She became precise. Questions clipped. Movements measured. Reputation mattered to her, and reputation dislikes unanswered gaps. I could almost see her recalculating the story she would tell, where to place blame, how to phrase the ending so it didn't sound like she'd lost. I didn't correct anyone. Silence again did its work. People tend to trust the calmest person in a conflict. Stillness reads like certainty. What changed most wasn't public opinion. It was private gravity. For the first time in our relationship, I wasn't orbiting her expectations. I was standing still. And when one person stops revolving, everyone notices the shift in balance. In the weeks that followed, life didn't collapse or explode, it settled. The apartment felt different without anticipation hanging in the air like static. Mornings were quieter, but the quiet no longer belonged to tension, it belonged to me. I noticed small things I'd ignored before. How coffee tastes when you're not bracing for someone else's mood, how sunlight looks when it isn't filtered through obligation. She sent one message eventually. Not an apology. Not anger. Just a careful line asking if we could talk like adults. I read it once, then archived it. Growth, I've learned, isn't proving a point. It's losing the need to. I didn't win anything visible. No applause, no vindication speech, no dramatic final scene. What I gained was subtler and far more durable. The understanding that respect isn't negotiated under ultimatums, and love that demands self-erasure is only possession wearing perfume. People think revenge must be loud to be satisfying. Mine was silent, administrative, almost invisible, and that's why it worked. Because the real victory wasn't canceling the wedding. It was realizing I should never have been standing at that altar at all.